You're listening to Story Struck. I'm Rachel, an editor and writing coach.
And I'm Neno, a ghostwriter and book coach. Welcome to our curious community where we dive into everything books and writing.
Now, let's get into the episode.
Okay, welcome everybody to today's podcast episode. We are going to be talking about character psychology, which is something that Rachel and I just love. I was telling her this morning when I'm like, hey, what kind of episode should we do? We didn't have a plan. And so I'm like, well, I was just laying in bed thinking about character psychology last night. So why don't we do this? Because this is the type of shit we do in our spare time. We just sit here and ponder things.
That's what keeps us up late at night.
Yeah. And so Rachel is, as you've heard, if you've been listening to us for any amount of time, is has a PhD in health psychology. So it's not just people who have fixations like moi in this topic. We actually have somebody who actually knows some shit here, which is amazing.
Well, thank you. So I know, like, when we were talking, we were looking at several different aspects that we'll kind of touch on today. So, like, we have, like, even if you just think about your own life, when you're thinking about character development and character psychology, we need to be students of ourselves and students of the people around us. You can get so much by looking at how people act, how they think, what informed what they do. And so take that time to just sit and explore yourself because we put a lot of ourselves in our books. The good side, the shadow side, like all of these things. And we put a lot of people around us in our books too. So, like, just in general, some things we're looking at is the past as a whole, which can encompass, right, family life, culture, trauma, things like that, and then like how that impacts our motivations, our mindset, and our beliefs, and then how that translates on the page for what your character not only says, but what they do. Because as we know, what we say and what we do can be two different things. We have that internal, external. So those will be kind of some different things that we're touching on today. Is there like a place that you want to start that like you're like super like let's dive into this one first?
There absolutely was. And then it flew out of my brain as I was just listening to you talk about all of the things.
Shall
But
we start at the dawn
why
of
don't we
time in the past and then work our way how it impacts us future and forward?
Oh, that's what I was gonna say. It came back to me. One of the things that I was gonna say is I think that it's super important as writers to be curious all the friggin'
Mhm.
time. Curiosity is what helps us to understand people. And I think that's, you know, one of the things. So I came from originally musical theater. And so it was the funniest thing because my singing coach was a singing coach. He was all classical music and stuff. And so I was talking to him about like, oh yeah, I was thinking about maybe double majoring in psychology. And he's like, what is it with all of you performers? All of you are so interested in psychology. And then I thought about it, to be an actor, to act and portray somebody, you have to have that deep understanding of or attempt to understand other people. You have to want to try and put yourself into their shoes in order to become that character, right? And so you have to have like this innate interest in psychology essentially. And I think that this is something that some writers really really lack because they're just like wanting to write a cute story and stuff, but they don't have that level of curiosity that makes them want to understand where other people are coming from and why other people are thinking the way they do, why they act the way they act. And that's something that just working on that curiosity muscle that I think can really elevate someone's writing indirectly.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, and yes. So when we think about writing our characters, like you said, like sometimes we just want to slap an idea up, we want to get it out there. But having that curiosity and putting some of that time and effort, like you don't have to do a full blown, crazy, ginormous backstory for every character all the time, but you should at least have some things. Even just one little snippet if it's a side character. Just know something because that is going to fuel the curiosity and the creativity and make writing so much easier. Because if you understand, your character and why they're thinking this, why they're doing this, all of these types of things, then the story's just gonna flow because you're not gonna have to sit and be like, "What did they do
What's
next?"
next?
You know,
Yeah.
you're gonna know what
Right.
they're gonna do
It's
next.
gonna make sense because you know the
Mhm.
person.
Yeah.
It's just like if I were to sit here and be like, oh, if I were to think about an event for me and Rachel to do, like we're not gonna go to a EDM concert. Like that would just make no sense for me to say, hey Rachel, do you want to go to an EDM show with me? She would be like, "Not, I would have a meltdown. This is too many crowds, too many sounds, too many lights. Absolutely not." Like it wouldn't make sense because I know Rachel. And it's the same thing when you know and understand your characters on that deep level, just like you do your closest friends. You're able to be like, oh, well, obviously they would go in this direction and they would do this thing because, or they would have this reaction to this thing that's forced upon them, right? Like, I'm not going to like write a story about you like partying on ecstasy at an EDM concert, can you imagine?
Oh my goodness. And then, right? And if I was a character and you put me in that situation, you would be like, what drove that? Because I know that's not her. So, like, did something
Right.
happen and Rachel had a crack and she's like gung ho crazy wild person? What's going on? Like,
She
why
had
is
a
she
mental
pretending to
break.
be this person? Right? A mental break. We need to call some help in.
Like,
That's
even like,
cool.
how would you react? Right?
How would
Like,
I
if you were
react to that?
forced into that situation, you had to walk through this EDM concert in order to get to the place that you needed to go. Like, how would you react? And you'd probably be like, no.
Like, no, like, mm-mm. So, like, putting if you put your character in a situation that they normally wouldn't go in, right? That right there fuels the curiosity because oh, this is so not their jam. They're gonna be like this. And if then they're trying to fit into that situation, they're gonna be real awkward about it. And like it's gonna be obvious on the outside and it's gonna be obvious on the inside, so there's just so many things to play with, and that just fuels the curiosity and the creativity.
Right. And also it helps the writing process too, because when you really understand them, and I think that's what not to always shit on male writers because there are some that I absolutely adore. Like TJ Klune, you have my heart. But but it's a stereotype for a reason because there's a lot of particularly in fantasy and romance when men do write those like they need to be intentional about it, and the ones that aren't, they do things that when women read them, they would be like, "Are you fucking kidding me? We would never do or say that." Like, we would or what? I read a book recently, and this was like, we don't shit on authors or books here because, books are subjective. But this one that I read, the plot, the premise of the book, absolutely brilliant. Absolutely loved it. And that's what kept me going in the book because the way the author wrote women was like, please go meet some women. Please, by all means, go talk to women. This is not how we talk to each other. This is not how we talk about ourselves. Like, please go. And I went on Goodreads just to see if, like, am I the only one? Am I being picky? Am I being a bitch here?
Are you bringing your up and putting it on there, right?
Exactly. And so, like, I went on to Goodreads to see if anyone else was receiving that, and there were some comments that were basically like, "Great premise, great plot, really liked these characters, except for the women because obviously you don't know any." Like,
My.
it was Goodreads is harsh, man.
Oh, yeah, Goodreads
Goodreads
is harsh.
harsh.
Yes, and, like, I think too, like, that would have been a great opportunity for beta reading and to, get some information from a diverse set of people who are all within your target audience, right? We always specify it has to be within your target audience because they could have told this person beforehand, like, hey, like this dialogue, like, it's not really hitting right. And if you get that feedback from one person, like maybe take that with a grain of salt. But if you're getting that back from a lot of people, then maybe that's where you need to kind of take a step back and look and see, was I doing that on purpose because I wanted to make a statement or I wanted to create like this dialogue around something? Or was that totally unintentional and I need
Right.
to fix that stat?
And if you don't have the access to get a large amount of beta readers, right? Sometimes, I
Mhm.
mean, I know TJ Klune talks about his beta readers, and he's got like three or four female beta readers, I think, were, I guess I don't know how they identify. They had feminine names. But, so he just has a handful that he knows and trusts and he uses on all of his books, which
Yeah.
yay, love that for him. Like some people are like, well, I would need to hire and pay my beta readers and I can't have a big bunch. Then what you do is you hire a editor who is maybe this type of person. So, like, if you are a white man writing a book with, women in it, maybe you hire a female editor that's able to give you a little bit of that, like, so this sentence really didn't seem like it aligned with the character. And you're the editor, so like more about like how the process of editing might go with it. But I just feel like you got to work what you can, right? Like you.
Yeah, so I would say, like, if you're at that stage and you're wanting to get feedback, like you said, you can look at free beta readers. There are some editors who do beta reading as a paid service at like a very small fraction of the price. And they're reading that mainly as a writer, or they're reading it as a reader, but giving you some feedback in the terms of an editor. And then if you kind of are in between that, I would suggest doing like a manuscript review. So that is kind of like a super light version of an edit. It's kind of like the hybrid between like a professional beta read and a developmental edit. So you are getting that higher level feedback at a much lower price tag because you're actually going to go in and you're going to make all of the changes, all of the edits, all of that before you then send it over for like a super intense edit. And I think that can be a great way to get feedback if you're unsure as well from stuff you've gotten from beta readers. You can kind of do that before you start making big changes to your manuscript.
Yeah, and that was something Denise Madre, one of our early guests, she had, that's what she did. She was a
Hmm.
sensitivity reader and she would do beta reading for people and stuff and give the perspective of a Black woman, on your book and stuff, which is so helpful, especially when we're writing outside of our own race or outside of our own gender. Or
And then too,
I,
right? Interviewing people and like getting
yes.
information on their experiences and things like that can also be very helpful. Because like I know one thing I wanted to like a book for an example, where we were talking about where did they, do a really good job of showing something was Hunger Games and how she portrayed trauma and that with Katniss. Like we have to think about right those experiences that our characters have and how that's going to impact their mental state, how that's going to impact their behaviors. So if you have a character who's experienced trauma, they're not just going to be la di da di da, everything's beautiful and fine like all the time. Like they're going to have issues, and they're going to have issues that are triggered by very specific things. So like, it's not enough to just say my character has had a traumatic past. We need to know what that trauma was because that trauma is going to be impacting. So, like, right, we had Katniss who, right, she was in the Hunger Games. She witnessed violence, like at threat of death, attempted, all of these things. Like, this is very, very intense that she went through. And when she gets back home, it's very obvious that she's a changed person. So, like, you have her, whether you've, read the books, seen the movies, like, I feel like most people be familiar, with that second book, second movie. There's just these little bits and pieces of moments within that second book that has the trauma. I think a really great one is when she's out hunting and she has a flashback when she fires the arrow. Like, that is a trigger for her, kind of like that fighting moment, and she just has like a almost like a panic attack, like all that floods back, and she's in that moment. So, like, we know for her, hunting used to be an escape. It was something she enjoyed going out to do. She was able to provide for her family. She was able to get out of the district. And now going and doing that is problematic because now she doesn't know, am I going to have a trigger, a breakdown. And then we see that just progress with her trauma increasing and her trauma responses increasing over the course of the series. And I think that was really beautifully done.
Yeah, and so reaching out to people who would know how either know what that experience feels like or who psychologically understands it, right? Like I
Yeah.
would talk to you because you have a background in psychology and you can explain what those experiences might be, or I can talk to somebody who has gone through therapy to heal from their trauma in order to get that into my character's book because I don't personally have firsthand knowledge of it. And exploring other options to get that information is important. And I think it's something that a lot of writers could maybe do a little bit more work, especially when you're writing something and you have your story is very character driven, like your character is going through these certain things and there it's not just about like these things happening to them, like they're on a mission for something. They're so yes, I agree.
So, and then kind of like we were talking about as well, how we have within our past, we have like our general lived experience, which is impacted by
Mhm.
like our family and our society and culture. And whether you're writing a fantasy book or something that's just, regular, not in a fantasy realm, there still is cultural aspects, whether it's fantasy, sci
Mhm.
fi, or in the real world. And so kind of looking at how will that inform behavior and things like that, right? We have, for example, going back to Hunger Games, that culture and society is very repressed. It's very high on fear. And so you see these people, going to the is it the reapings, whatever they're going, and the kids are being called out, and they're all forced to be there. And you can see that in the body language, the difference between when they're in like the capital where everybody's all rah rah and it's a party. And then you're in District 12 and like you could hear like a pin drop, right? So,
Yeah.
like, just paying attention to those little differences, that is gonna shape the behavior, of everybody in the book and not just your main character. So I think taking the time to look into all of these elements and how they interplay, um, within things, right? Like we can see also PETA, right? He is helping his parents run their bakery and that's his job and that's what he does. And if he messes up, he gets punished. And that's just how it is. So I just think that's really neat when we take a look at that overall picture and and keep that in mind no matter what type of genre we're writing.
Yeah, and that also makes me think about like, when we're looking at the past, a lot of our characters will have some sort of trauma that they have experienced that informs how they move throughout the world. And there's different types of trauma. I love Jonathan Decker on cinema therapy. He
Hmm.
talks about big T trauma and little T trauma. And it's important to recognize that they're both traumas. They both greatly affect us and stuff, but the way a big T trauma might manifest for somebody is going to be very different than a little T trauma. Um, and seeing you know, how that might play out for somebody. A little T trauma might be something like they were bullied about something in their youth or whatever. And that's maybe it's something to do with their appearance and that plays into an insecurity that they have that in the
Hmm.
romance novel they start to overcome because this person tells them about all of the wonderful things about them and they start to see it and believe it or whatever. Right? And then you have big T trauma like what Katniss went through, you know?
Yes, yes, exactly. And kind of like you were saying, looking at how it just does subtle things with behavior. So if we look back, I'm going to keep playing on the Hunger Games thing right here. So we have the scene where Katniss is starving and Peeta burns bread and he throws the bread out to her. And in his mind, he's like, I'm doing this to save her. I'm going to get punished, but I have to help her. And then in her mind, she feels like she doesn't feel good about it. Even though he did that for her, it's almost like she held some animosity against him. And it just was really interesting to see how that dynamic played out where she was like, ugh. I'm with him and he like threw me this bread and he thinks I'm less than and he thinks this and this and this. And he was like, no, I was trying to genuinely be helpful. I saw someone hurting and in need. And so, like, how we can misconstrue things and using that dynamic too of, and just think in your own life, right? When you said something or did something and the other person interpreted it in a totally different way and like it's like whoa, what happened? So like that can lead to some really interesting interactions with your characters, and then how you were also saying like in the romance book where they have this, small t trauma, like they're getting teased and bullied about an appearance, and then we look at how can that little thing feed into the overarching story. So that love interest is giving them what they need to help build that self confidence up. So we can look at this in all different ways, whether it's something huge, big plot, or something little that just adds more realness and
Yeah.
richness to the story.
Yeah, that's the thing too, and I think that's the component that I think is missing from a lot of books is bringing in those like real, especially like in fantasy, because like in
Hmm.
fantasy it's all such an other world and stuff like that, but bringing in those little components about those insecurities from childhood bullying and stuff and how this, especially with romantasy being what it is, this person seeing it, it brings about a relatability
Hmm.
that connects you more with the character and therefore with the story itself. And I think whenever it's done well, it just it takes an already good book and just makes it so much greater. So, and then, oftentimes what goes with the trauma is like their family life, the culture around them, like you were
Hmm.
saying, with like living in District 12 and things like that. So you have those components between past relationships, past family situations, past history, what have they seen and stuff, which then shape the mindset and beliefs that they have, both about the world and themselves. Like, kind of builds up this like foundation of who your character is at the beginning of the book.
Yeah. And like, not every character has to have this massive trauma, right? Because, like, we also enjoy reading
Hmm.
cozy books and things like that. And so, even those types of things, it's still going to impact what the character does. So, there's
Right. Like
cozy
Legends
mystery.
and Lattes.
Yeah.
It's a great one. That's one that I think I absolutely love that book, and that's really the one that a lot of people talk about when they're talking about, like, cozy fantasy is Legends and
Hmm.
Lattes. The main character, she didn't have, like, big T trauma. However, she did have, like, a lot of this struggle with, like, her past of being this, like, big warrior person, um and having to like deal with like, okay, how do I make bonds, because she not only been very solo in her life, but the people that she was in contact with she didn't fully trust, and so that lack of trust was like, a little T, maybe, that she had to heal. Like, it was something for her to actually heal and evolve and to be able to trust the new friends that she was making, the new love interests that she had, and bring that all together. That is also a male author that did a fantastic job on writing women. And it is hard. I have found that it is very difficult for a man to write lesbians, not only women, but
Mm-hmm.
lesbians. He did fantastic with it. Yeah, that was the book that turned my mom into a reader.
Oh,
So,
that's awesome. I'm going to have to add that to my list.
oh my gosh, the third one is coming out next month, so it's a perfect
Ooh,
time.
yes. And so there's another cozy author that I really love, Ellie Alexander, and she has the Bake Shop mystery series. She has some other ones, but that one's prolific, very long going mystery series. And in the very first book, we have our main character, Jules, and she has this trauma going on, which in adult life, going through a divorce, like that can be a very big trauma. It's a lot of loss. And I believe there was like infidelity that led to it. And so, like, we kind of learn different things through the book. But like, that is kind of her starting point in the book is she's going through this trauma. and she's processing that while she's trying to restart her life. And like, so obviously, when there's the potential like love interest, which is usually a subplot in a cozy, she's not jumping right on that. Like, obviously, she's going through a very traumatic time. It wouldn't make sense for her to then be like, "Ooh," like all this stuff. It's kind of like, yeah, we have this history, but, not really, kind of yet. And so there's like this natural progression as she's kind of reclaiming it and having that past event impact her right now, even though it's a lighthearted, cozy mystery. We can still have those moments that are going to inform our character behavior, and that's what makes them very well rounded. And then, too, right, we get to see the family dynamic of how do her parents respond in this? And that tells us about their relationship in the past. Have they always been supportive? Has there been animosity? Like there's just so many components that go in that can fuel your dialogue and fuel your story.
Yeah, and I lost my train of thought again because I got distracted by all your wonderful words. There it is. I found it again. It came back. But, one of the things is that it left my brain again. Fuck me.
Oh.
Too easily. There it is. If they make like so one of the things that sometimes characters do is that if their transition to making this this choice or whatever doesn't have enough resistance.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
yeah.
because humans are naturally very resistant to change. And so, say you have, right, like going back to Legends and Lattes, she was very resistant to trust these people for like a good chunk of the book, even though she cared about them, even though she wanted to protect them, even though she was gaining her happiness there and stuff. She was still very hesitant and resistant because this is what she's always known. She's always known to be extra protective over herself and to not trust people and stuff. So it took her a while in the book to build that up. And that was great because we have a lot of resistance. Humans are very stubborn. So then when your character's just like, "Oh, okay, sure." Unless it's like they're the most like ADHD Sagittarius, like maybe we don't do that. you know? Well, yeah, let's go on an adventure. That sounds great. No, Bilbo had to be convinced. He had to experience some excitement and feel that contrast to his quiet life to then start craving that adventure, right? He wasn't just like, "Oh, okay, sure, I'll go on an adventure." The dwarves coming in initially added that need for him and stuff. And I just jumped fantasies, but hopefully everyone
No, that
kept
works.
track.
All right. And that is what brings in the tension of,
Mm.
them going against what they would normally do and how are they going to respond in that situation. That is what makes the story exciting. That's what kind of pulls us in. And then also, right, we're looking at are they responding in a genuine manner? And if they're not, we have to kind of look at a couple of things, right? Are we doing that intentionally because they're an unreliable narrator? And we want the reader to know they're an unreliable narrator. But, like, again, that has to be done with intention because we need to make our main character somebody that our reader wants to get involved with and follow. Like, I was reading a series that's like a huge, massive series, and I just could not get behind it. I was like, this main character, I'm like, am I supposed how are you likable? You're being a total douche like the whole time. I'm like,
Mhm.
there's nothing redeeming about you. And it just and not just him, the supporting cast of characters. Not a single one of them was likable at all. And I'm like, okay, this is eventually going to turn. This is going to change. It's going to. I know it is because it's everybody. Like this book is massive and huge and a huge series. No, the whole time I was like, I can't even. And I gave that book a lot longer than I would ever give a book, just because I was like, I want to like this book. Like I want to read this series,
Yes.
and I just
Ugh.
couldn't. And it was heartbreaking to me that I just couldn't get behind the character. So I think that that too is
Mm.
important, right? If we are having an unreliable narrator or if we're having a character that has flaws, we want to strike that balance between it being interesting and it being I can't.
Yeah, I had a book that had a similar thing. I remember talking to you about this.
Mhm.
Um, this was a book that I read right before I started writing my Loki novel. So I hope you know which one I'm talking about because we're not going to shit on
Yeah.
anybody. But um, I was so freaking excited to read this book. I saw that book and I'm like full body chills. So excited, so excited. And I knew that it was going to be different than I was anticipating
Mhm.
based on what the book was and how it was. And, like I knew that there was going to be a difference in it, but I was so frustrated that I was smarter than the main character.
Oh,
I'm like, you are this main character who has this super awesome magical thing that's happening in the book. I don't want to give anything away. It has like this like crazy thing or whatever. And you're not seeing this one component. Like this is so blatantly obvious. And it took you half the damn book to put those two pieces together. And you also put it together at a time that was just like, why would you even be thinking of that right now? Like, what? So, that really took away from it. Like I'm like, I want to like this book so bad. I finished the book because also it's important to read books that are not there, are not quite great in certain respects because it gives you an idea of like, oh, okay, so this is the contrast, right? This is what this author did really, really well that I want to emulate, and this is what this author did poorly that I need to avoid. And why were they poor at it? Like, why was this one worse than this one? What did they do differently? So that way you can take that into your own writing and stuff. So yeah, it's tough with that. I did want to I was going to say something else, but I'm like, no, that's going to give too much away about what the book is. So, anyways, also, I had a brain pop while we were chatting,
okay.
talking about all of these components that are kind of like foundational things for your character. You have the trauma, you have the beliefs, you have the past, their family, like you have all of these things, but one of the things is what's their motivation and how does what they need contrast with it?
Yeah.
That is like their motivation. And I think, we touched on this a little bit with Daniel David Wallace's episode from last week. And it's just like what these characters are going in for. His favorite is House in the Cerulean Sea. TG Clune, love you. Come on the podcast. But I would fucking die. But but anyways, he loves a House in the Cerulean Sea, and it's like what his motivation is in the beginning and what he actually needs are two different things. And he gets, I mean, essentially he gets both if you look at it in a certain way, right? He goes in to make sure that these kids are taken care of, that, like his job is happy, and he just does his job and goes back home. But what he needs is a family. And what these kids need are a family. And that's what they all get in the end. Spoiler alert, it's a cozy fantasy. It's lovely. If you don't know it's all going to be have a happy ending in the end, then what are you doing? But like, so his motivation to start off with and what his needs were very, very different things. So when you're looking at your character, their motivation and their needs should have some sort of clash, I think.
Absolutely. And then, right, we can also look at external motivation versus an internal motivation, and that can make it even
Mm,
deeper. And how do we have the conflict there? And then something else that I was thinking about is when we're looking at developing our characters and maybe what we're using to inform it and how deep we're going is to look at the genre expectations. So, depending on the type of book you're writing, like if you're doing a cozy mystery, you're not going to have some super crazy trauma because that's not what the readers are coming for, in that book is like PTSD of Katniss's level, we're not going to see that in a
Mhm.
cozy mystery, right? It doesn't match it. Where if we were doing something like Hunger Games, where there is this huge, big T trauma, and we don't acknowledge it, then something's going to feel off. So taking a look at what genre you're writing, the expectations, the tropes, um, how deep and dark things get, or is it more lighthearted? But even if it's lighthearted, we can still touch on stuff. Like we still have those little T traumas, or we can have big T traumas that aren't as severe as Katniss's big T traumas. Like, right, divorce. That's a big T trauma, but that's not to the degree of what's going to happen if somebody has had some kind of violence or threat of violence or things like that.
That is such a good point and something that I didn't even think of because I'm not a Virgo and I don't think that deeply. I guess I don't know. I don't think about like the plan and the structure as much as you do. Like cuz if you're writing a cute little like a cute romance, like a little meet cute romance type of thing, you're not going to have them die in the
Yeah,
you
right. Yeah.
know like
Like, too, like a cozy mystery, a lot of them may start with a death that's off scene that, like the first book in a series, like maybe a family member died and left them their store and that's why they're coming there. And like that's a big trauma, but the way it's touched on in the book is totally different than how we would touch on trauma in Hunger Games, like when, Rue is killed or her sister is killed. Like that's gonna show totally different because of genre expectations.
Yeah, yeah, which again is helpful for you as the writer because if you're
Mhm.
sitting there like, no, 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 I absolutely need to murder this person, then maybe that's an indication that your book's not so cozy.
Happened to me, right?
That's
Like I
okay. Yeah.
started out like, oh, I have this beautiful cozy mystery series, and then I realized how dark and demented my brain is. And I was like, okay, I thought all this time I was going to be this beautiful cozy author, but no, I want to write like deep dark stuff and fight scenes and like crazy shit. And I just had to accept that and realize I'm not a cozy author. I am a
Yes.
dark,
Maybe.
creepy author.
Yeah. Maybe one of these days a story will strike you and it'll be like, nope, I'm meant to be cozy. But I think also, when we're going through certain things, because like to your writing and you and what you're going through and what, your character's going through, there's oftentimes a connection. So
Mhm.
if we're talking about character psychology, I feel like we need to also have a little moment of looking at our own psychology, right? Our own as
Yes.
as writers, right? You're going through, if you're going through like a difficult time in your life, like it's one of those things to where it's like, okay, then maybe your work is going to be a little bit more dark or a little bit more cynical or a little, things like that. And that's fine, especially when you're going into it like knowing that okay, I know that my rate TJ Klune. Okay, I know. I'm talking a lot about TJ Klune. Okay.
Oh, good. I've been all on Hunger Games today, so go for it.
But the second book in his series, was it Somewhere Beyond the Sea is the second book for it. You could see he was very upset about all of the transphobia going on in the
Mm,
world. And so he put some of his anger about this into his book and he dedicated the book to trans kids, and so like he was doing it with his brain turned on because as writers sometimes like this is how we get things out. Sometimes we have just so many. I know I have so many damn words in this head all the time, which is why the podcast is great. I can write 3 books at one time and still coach people and still not stop talking. There's a lot of words in here. And so you need to get them out in multiple ways. And especially for us neurodivergent people, we need that. And so your life stuff, the things that are on you, on your heart are going to like seep into your work. And the more aware you are of it, the more conscious you can make it. So for example, with my Loki series, I was very upset at how somebody I loved was being treated by another person. And they were having a hard time standing up for themselves because of the big T and little T trauma that they had gone through in their life. And so I wanted to do something because like me being supportive, me being, like trying to encourage them to step into their power, things like that was going, was doing a little help, sure, but like it wasn't like the transformation I wanted to see from them. And so I had to write that in a book. And I'm going to be dedicating the book to the people that I love. Maybe not them specifically, just so they don't like.
Don't feel called
Well, they
out.
know that
Yeah.
it's they. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but they know it's about them. They know that they inspired it and stuff. But and we were just talking about it actually recently because I needed to name a character, and I'm like, so this is like kind of your like one of the character that I'm like deeming as you in it, but I need a different name for them. What do you think?
Very
But
cool.
anyways. But anyways, we have to like kind of go into it with like our brains turned on about it because me knowing that I was putting this energy into it, my intentionality behind it could be I want to inspire other people who are going through the same type of narcissistic abuse to empower them to be bold and learn to be okay with being the villain in someone else's story, So, it's the end
I
of my
love
life.
that. And from the psychologist hat on here, I will definitely say like writing can bring things up for us personally. So we need to make sure as well that we're taking care of ourselves and our own mental, emotional well being. So, taking that time, like if we need to process stuff, to find a professional to process that with if we need to, whoever that may be, therapist, counselor, someone within your spiritual community, a friend, family member, whoever you feel comfortable talking to. And I think if you are enjoying this type of conversation and you want to dig deeper, Nino and I absolutely love cinema therapy. I know you mentioned them earlier. Go check out their YouTube channel. It is incredible. I love listening to them talk about it. So we have the therapist, and then we have, um, is he a producer? He does
He's
something
a
in
director.
a director.
Yeah,
Okay.
Alan C. Wright. He's a director.
There we go. So yeah, so we get both of these perspectives and they cover a huge, huge range of topics, of genres and characters. So definitely check that out. And then, I know you have something in the works if people
I
want to dig into this
do.
too. Give us
So
all
in my Story Weavers community, we do community calls, but then we also do occasional workshops. It's kind of turning into monthly just because I don't know, I'm an overachiever. And so next month on November 11th, so 11/11, I did that intentionally. I am having a main character energy workshop where we're going to go over your specific characters and kind of break down their fundamental basic psychology and how this plays out throughout the story. So that way you have something that you can have like on paper of like, okay, I knew my character, but now I understand my character. Because sometimes we know things, but we don't fully understand them. So here it'll be something that you can actually look at and be like, okay, so this is why my character is going to be doing this. Now I have the background reasoning behind it. Because even if it doesn't enter the book, you knowing it is going to help you to put in those flourishes and put in those things that people are going to be like, oh yeah, she gets it, or whatever. So that's going to be in the Story Weavers community, which will be linked and is also everywhere else. It's on my Instagram, it's on my website, it's everywhere. You can find it anywhere. But it's the Story Weavers Writers Community. There's 30 days free when you sign up. You get 30 days free. So if you just want to sign up and join the workshop and see how you like our community. Also on Thursday, the this Thursday, so the 23rd, we're doing our community call, which is just where we get together and we chat and we just like say like, hey, what's it like to be a writer and stuff like that. This month we're talking about overcoming overthinking. So if that podcast episode resonated with you when we did that a couple of weeks ago, then you might want to check out Thursday's community call. And we also have a writer show and tell in there. We have I do story activations, which are basically like tarot readings that help you with mindset things, help you with story things. That's just like a 10-minute video that just like inspires you to do things and very activating, hence the names. All of that will be linked below, and I hope to see a ton of people there.
Yes. Oh my god, it sounds wonderful, and I can say, like, the live meetings with all of the different writers is so much fun getting to connect with people because there's so many different backgrounds, different genres. We have some seasoned folks, some folks that are newer to writing, so you really get that camaraderie no matter what level you're at. And real quick, you said something that was so brilliant that I just wanted to touch on before we wrapped up, and you were saying that just because you have done all of this work doesn't mean it has to go in the book. Absolutely right. We're not creating all of this stuff because all of it's going to be mentioned. We're going to mention every trauma and we're going to have every trauma and inform every different thing. Like, no, like that is you creating a whole character. That is going to fuel things through the book that may be subtle or they may be a big slap in the face, something big, but not everything has to appear in the book. That it's going to appear in ways that the person is acting and behaving without necessarily needing to be called out.
Yeah, because I mean that type of thing really does make it relatable. It's like one of those things like if you know, you know.
Yeah.
Like I'm listening to a book right now. The main character is so ADHD. It has never been once mentioned. I'm like, she is an ADHD Gemini. I don't even need to be told because she's so written that way. It doesn't need to be in there. And there's probably like a neurotypical, is going to read that and be like, wow, this bitch can't keep her shit together, and they're, probably going to have some like a different perspective on her where I'm looking at her and like, girl, same, I can't keep my mouth shut either. I get it. Like, so it adds that aspect to the people who are experiencing it. And especially whenever you are an intentional writer, when you're an impact driven writer, like, I wrote my book to help people going through the same thing that person that I love has gone through. And so like I'm going in it with the intention to create an impact for somebody, to show somebody that there's another way to be and that they can find chosen family. They don't have to deal with the narcissistic family that's around them. Um and I have a client who's also doing the same type of thing. She's taking her life and she's putting it into a fantasy world. And when we do readings and stuff together and we do coaching calls together, I just see like there's going to be somebody who's like in the midst of a situation that she was in and is going to see themselves so solidly in that character that they're going to be like, and the thing is like that character finds a way out of these situations, right? And so then that person who's in that situation, even though she's reading a fantasy novel, she's going to see, okay, if this character can get through this thing, like I can find a way through this thing too, And I think that's the important thing to we bring to these books.
Absolutely fabulous. So please, everybody, go and join Nino's community and check out all of the amazing resources and definitely, definitely do that writing workshop because it is going to be, oh my God, I can't wait. I'm just so excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. And if you have any other ideas for like workshops or topics that you want us to talk about or anything, let us know because we're planning season 2. So drop it in the comments, just message us, email us, just let us know because we really do want to make this a community that both in the Story Weavers community, but also on the Story Struck podcast. Like we want to make this a place where everyone feels like they can gain the tools to thrive as a writer and to write books that change the world. So please drop that in the comments. Let us know. And until next time,
Bye-bye.
thank you for listening. Check out the show notes for details and links from the episode. And don't forget to subscribe and follow for more. Special thanks to our composer, Micah Silverstein. Enjoy the rest of the music.